Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are getting into a phase of major construction projects that is both absolutely critical and often really confusing.
It really is.
We're talking about that period after a project is physically complete, but before the contract is truly finalized. The building is up, but does it actually work?
Exactly. And for anyone in complex infrastructure, this final stage can define success or failure. We're going to be focusing on the FIDI Yellow Book 2017.
And specifically?
Specifically, Clause 12, tests after completion. We'll call them TAC.
Okay, so Clause 12. This is so powerful because it's all about risk, right? It's for that period when the employer has already taken over the site, they're using it. But performance hasn't been proven yet.
Think of it this way. You've bought a new car, you're driving it every day. But the contract says that 6 months from now, we have to do an official test to prove it hits the fuel economy numbers promised. Clause 12 is that test.
And this is a really important point to make up front. These tests, these TACs, they aren't automatic.
Not at all.
They only happen if they were specifically written into the employer's requirements right at the very beginning. If they're not in there, Clause 12 is just empty.
Right. So our mission today is to really extract the surprising contractual leverage points here. The deadlines, the penalties, the things that protect both sides.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. The actual procedure for these tests. This is under subclause 12.1. What's fascinating to me is how the responsibility for running the test shifts almost completely to the employer. Why is that?
Well, it has to. At this point, the employer is the one operating the facility. They control everything. So Clause 12.1 is super clear about this, and it's a huge risk point for the employer. They have to provide, well, everything needed to do the test properly.
And when you say everything, what are we talking about? That sounds like it could be a logistical nightmare.
It's a very detailed checklist. It's meant to stop the employer from blaming the contractor if the test fails, just because they weren't read.
So things like?
Things like all the electricity, water, any sewage connections, all the equipment, the fuel, consumables, instruments, and this is the big one, the labor and the suitably qualified staff to actually run the plant.
So if a test needs a chemical plant to run for 72 hours and the employer's team doesn't order enough feedstock, that's on them.
That is 100% on them. And the method for the test isn't up for grabs either. It has to follow three things. First, what was in the employer's requirements. Second, the O&M manuals.
The ones the engineer already approved.
Exactly. And third, any guidance the contractor has to give during the test. So it's a very structured process.
So once the site is handed over, how does this all get started? Who kicks it off?
The engineer has to get the clock ticking. They must give a formal notice to the contractor. And it has to be at least 21 days.
A 21-day heads up.
Yep. It has to state the date, the place, and an estimated program for the tests. The 21 days is a hard requirement.
Which brings us to a really kind of punitive part of the contract. What happens if the contractor gets that 21-day notice and just doesn't show up?
The absent contractor clause. It's designed to force engagement. If the contractor doesn't attend, the employer can just go ahead with the test.
Okay.
But here's the kicker. The test shall be deemed to have been made in the contractor's presence. And, maybe more importantly, the contractor shall be deemed to have accepted the readings as accurate.
Wow. So you lose your right to challenge anything, the results, how they did it, just by not being there. Why is it so harsh?
It's to stop the project from being held hostage. The employer can't have final sign-off stuck in limbo because a contractor is too busy or maybe trying to avoid a bad result. It forces the project to move forward.
That makes sense. But there must be a check on that, right? I mean, the employer has been using the works for a while at this point.
Absolutely. The contract is pragmatic. When everyone evaluates the results, both sides have to take, and I'm quoting here, appropriate account of the effect of the employer's prior use of the works.
So if they've been running the plant outside of its design parameters for 6 months, you can't blame the contractor if performance is a little off.
Precisely. It builds in that commercial reality.
Okay, so that sets up the how. Now let's get to the real drama, the deadlines. This is where Clause 12 really gets its teeth, right? It's all about stopping the employer from just dragging their feet.
This is where it gets fascinating, because it uses money to force people to be prompt. If the contractor incurs any extra cost, so extra staff time, remobilization, because of an unreasonable delay by the employer, the contractor gets cost plus profit.
Not just cost recovery, but profit on top of it. That phrase, cost plus profit, must be a huge red flag for an employer's project manager.
It turns a simple delay into a direct cash penalty. But, it gets even more severe when the clock really runs out. That brings us to what I call the automatic passes, the deemed passed scenarios.
Okay, let's break those down. Scenario 1. This is in 12.2, and it's about failing to get the test done in time.
Right. First, we need to define that time. It's the defects notification period, the DNP. For anyone who doesn't know, that's basically the warranty period after completion, usually a year or two.
The clock that governs all final liability.
Exactly. So scenario 1 says that if, for any reason not the contractor's fault, a TAC can't be completed during that DNP, the works or the section shall be deemed to have passed the test.
Deemed passed. That's incredible. So if the employer just can't get their act together,
Yeah.
they can't get the right staff or permits or whatever, the contractor just gets a pass.
Just like that. The employer loses their right to test simply because they couldn't schedule it. It puts enormous pressure on them to get it done. The risk of delay is all theirs.
Okay, so now let's look at what happens if the test does happen, but the works fail. Even here, the contract protects the contractor from delays. This is scenario 2 under 12.4.
Yes, so the test fails. The contractor needs to get back in to investigate and fix things. The employer, who is using the plant, can say, look, you can only come in at a convenient time for us.
Which is fair enough.
It is, but the clause says that time must be reasonable. So
Okay.
the employer can't just say, well, it's never convenient for us to shut down.
And if they do, if they just keep putting it off.
Then you trigger the second automatic pass. If the contractor doesn't get a notice giving them access during that DNP, they are just relieved of the obligation to fix it.
And the punchline.
The works shall be deemed to have passed the test.
So even with a documented failure, if the employer delays access for too long, the contractor is off the hook and the failure is ignored.
It's a clean break.
Yeah.
The contract won't be held open forever. And by the way, that financial penalty is here too. If the contractor incurs costs from the employer unreasonably delaying access, they get cost plus profit again.
It's a constant message. Be efficient or pay up.
That's the whole structure of the clause, really.
So let's say none of these automatic passes happen. The works fail, and we're on the normal path. What's the default procedure under 12.3?
The default is simple remediation. The failure is treated like any other defect. It goes back to the standard defect rules, the contractor fixes the problem, and then they have to do the test again.
And if it was the contractor's fault, they foot the bill for all that extra cost.
Yes, if the failure is because of their design or workmanship, the employer can recover their costs for the retesting.
But there is this incredible alternative, isn't there? The financial exit strategy, the buyout in 12.4.
This is often the most sensible route on huge projects. If the works fail, and if the parties agreed to specific performance damages in a schedule at the start of the contract, the employer is entitled to that payment.
And the key phrase here is that the payment is in full satisfaction of this failure.
Exactly. The contractor can do the math. They can look at the cost of a month-long shutdown and a complex engineering fix and compare that to the pre-agreed penalty. If the penalty is cheaper or just faster, they can just write a check.
Which leads us to the third and final deemed passed scenario.
The simplest one of all. If the contractor pays those performance damages during the DNP, then the works or section shall be deemed to have passed those tests after completion.
It's brilliant risk management, really. You turn a massive engineering problem into a predictable financial transaction. It allows the contract to finally close.
It creates certainty, which is what everyone wants at the end of a long project.
So if we pull this all together for the learner, we started with what seems like a technical testing clause, but it's really a masterclass in risk allocation and enforcing deadlines.
That's the key takeaway. Clause 12 is much less about the technical side of the test and much more about the intersection of time, money, and responsibility.
With a very clear bias.
A very clear bias.
Yeah.
The use of cost plus profit, and especially those three deemed past scenarios, they all heavily penalize the employer for being slow, for being unreasonable, or for just failing to manage their own resources. It's a clause designed for finality.
It puts immense pressure on the owner to get it done or legally forfeit their right to complain. It's an amazing piece of contractual engineering. That wraps up this deep dive.
It was a pleasure digging into the details of Clause 12.
So here's a final thought for you to take away. Since an employer's failure to provide access or simply complete tests on time can automatically relieve the contractor and deem the works passed, how might this intense contractual pressure change the speed and reasonableness of decision-making for a project management team during those critical closing months of major project? Something to think about. We'll see you next time.